Annette, can you just text me if you can hear me? Or I'll text you. Annette, I just want to confirm you can hear us.
Yeah.
Hi, Annette, can you hear us? Okay. Oh no, that's okay. All right, we're gonna start now then. Okay, thanks. She can hear us.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the disability meeting for December 2020. Representing the PBA,
Joe Alejandro.
Betty, do you have you? Betty?
Eddie Caladero.
Ed,
Representing the DEA,
Kenny Sparks.
SBA,
Anthony Borelli.
LBA,
John Beatty, designee for Lou Turco.
CEA,
Chris Monahan.
Commissioner of Finance,
Phil Dukes for Acting Finance Commissioner Michael Hyman.
Mayor,
Cynthia Collins, designee for Mayor Bill de Blasio.
Comptroller,
Susanna Vickers, designee for Controller Scott Stringer.
John Dorsa, alternate designee for Control Scott Stringer.
Police Commissioner,
Stephanie Zimberg for Commissioner Shea.
the Actuary,
Carrie Chan, Chief Actuary.
Keith Snow, you're on also?
He's on here, he might not be able to talk.
Okay. Law Department,
Marta Ross, Law Department by invitation.
Sharon Stifo, Law Department by invitation.
Nick Sifuni, you're on?
Nick Sifuni is counsel, CEA, LBA, SVA, and DEA. Thank you, Kim.
Gary DeRosa,
Gary DeRosa, present by invitation.
Mark Marino? Is he on? Okay. And let's just go around the room. Chris McGrath, PBA by invitation.
David Morris, PBA by invitation.
Stanley Thomas, Police Pension Fund, present by invitation.
Ariana Andre, Police Pension Fund, present by invitation.
Lisa Diaz, Police Pension Fund, present by invitation.
Nicole Giangrisi, Police Pension Fund, present by invitation.
Bob Senskis, Pension Fund, present by invitation.
Kevin Holleran, Pension Fund, present by invitation.
Handsome, oh, go ahead. Good. Handsome Randall Pension Fund, present by invitation.
Manuel Salas, Police Pension Fund, present by invitation.
Okay, is there anyone that I missed?
Jeff's trying to get on.
Damian Law,
John
DOF,
Flynn,
legal
Police
by
Pension.
invitation.
John Flynn, Police Pension Fund, present by invitation.
Mark Marino, PBA, present by invitation.
The auditor, we have to get her.
Representing the auditor, do we have one person, two people? Just state your name for the record.
Hi, good morning. Sharon Campbell from Grant Thornton.
Okay, Joe?
All right, so I just want to know, are we going to take this out of order, or the auditors are going to remain for the whole public? So I just want to make sure.
Yeah, why don't we let the auditors go first? That would be great, thanks.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So make it easy. So on pages 11 through 100 is a presentation by the auditors for fiscal year 2020. You're up.
Sharon, do you need to be presenter?
Yes, please. That would be helpful.
Okay. I've given you presenter control. You can just share your screen when you see the pop-up.
Okay. Before I share my screen, I do want to provide an introduction. My name is Sharon Campbell. I'm a managing director in Grant Thornton's Employee Benefit Plan audit practice, and I led, with the assistance of my engagement team, each of the New York City retirement systems audits. I appreciate the opportunity to present to you today the results of the audit of the New York City Police pension funds as of and for the year ended June 30th, 2020. Overall, the audit went well, and we issued an unmodified, clean opinion dated October 28th, 2020. Before I go into the presentation, I would like to take a moment to thank the Police Pension Fund's management team for their assistance throughout the audit process in getting us up to speed. We really appreciated their expertise, their agility, adaptability, and transparency demonstrated consistently throughout the audit. I'm also extremely thankful for the coordinated efforts of all the team members who are integral to the successful and timely completion of this year's audit. So with that, I will share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my monitor with the screen presented?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so this screen depicts the core engagement team. These were the managers on the audit. The next screen is our subject matter experts and specialists who assisted us throughout the audit. We're going to move into responsibilities. So we are responsible for performing an audit of the system's combining financial statements as prepared by management and conducted under U.S. generally accepted auditing standards, forming and expressing an opinion as to whether the basic combining financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with U.S. GAAP, reading the other information in the combining financial statements, such as management's discussion and analysis, and the required supplementary information, and assessing whether it's materially consistent with the basic combining financial statements, and reporting any identified significant deficiencies and/or material weaknesses in internal control related to financial reporting. As a reminder, an audit provides reasonable but not absolute assurance that the combining financial statements are free of material misstatements due to fraud or error, and does not relieve management or those charged with governance with their respective responsibilities. Our responsibilities are further described in the agreement for the citywide audit. So this slide just depicts those charged with governance and management responsibilities. I'm not going to go through every single bullet point here. I would like to highlight some of those. For those charged with governance, they're responsible for overseeing the financial reporting process, informing us of any fraud or suspected fraud, including any views about fraud risks, and informing us of any other matters that may be relevant to our audit, such as matters warranting particular audit attention, any significant communications with regulators, any matters related to the effectiveness of internal control and your related oversight responsibilities. Management is responsible for fairly presenting the basic combining financial statements in accordance with U.S. GAAP, including management's discussion and analysis and the required supplementary information, communicating any significant accounting and internal control matters to those charged with governance, informing us of fraud, illegal acts, significant deficiencies, and/or material weaknesses in their controls, informing us of significant subsequent events, and providing us with certain written representations in the form of a representation letter. An example of that is included in the package that you were provided in section 4. Okay. High-level audit scope. The audit was completed and the report was signed off in October. We are presenting now, and the CAFR will be issued in December 2020. We're in the process of reviewing the work provided to us related to the additional information, supplementary information for the CAFR. Okay, so we're going to go into our audit approach. We take a risk-based audit approach, so we update our understanding of the environment in which the system operates. We use that knowledge and understanding to perform a risk assessment of the financial reporting process. We determine materiality, and then we identify financial statement categories that would likely be materially misstated, whether due to fraud or error. And we develop procedures and focus audit attention and our efforts on those areas of greater risk. High level, we apply materiality threshold, and any items that are greater than materiality are included in scope. So significant risks, we identify significant risks. The following significant risks were identified: management override over internal controls over financial reporting and investment fair value, specifically the alternative investments. We did not note any exceptions or significant matters as it relates to these areas. Other areas of audit focus include the investments and investment income. We test for completeness and accuracy of investment information and the valuation. Member loans, where we focus on eligibility of the member loans. Member contributions, benefit payments, and the net pension liability with the assistance of our in-house actuaries. We also focus on IT general controls, referred to as ITGCs. Areas of focus include security administration, program maintenance, program execution, technology operations, and cybersecurity. We have included some IT observations and some recommendations. Those would be in section 3 of the package that was provided to you. Okay, we did utilize our compensation and benefits consulting practice, our in-house actuaries, to review the reasonableness of the actuarial assumptions and methods that were used by the actuary to determine the system's net pension liability. We also utilized our New York pricing group for investment valuation, and we utilized our corporate value consulting group to test a small portion of the commingled investments and debt securities for the ETIs. We utilized our subcontractor, Galeros Robinson. Okay, other considerations as it relates to COVID-19, we were able to gain remote access. So I want to thank management again for their assistance in helping us with that process so that we could perform the audit fully remotely. Summary of misstatements, there was a proposed adjustment related to a reclass in an investment income line item. It was just a reclass, so there was no change in the net pension or changes in net pension restricted for benefits. We're going to move into the other required communications next. So we're not aware of any going concern or longevity matters. We're not aware of any fraud or non-compliance with laws or regulations. There were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses that were identified over financial reporting, and our communications of internal matters are included in section 2 of the package that you were provided. We're not aware of any use of other auditors as it relates to the system audit. We did not utilize internal audit. Related party and related party transactions are appropriately disclosed in the financial statements, which were included in section 5 of the package. There were no significant unusual transactions identified, no significant issues discussed with management, no disagreements with management. We're not aware of management's consultation with any other accountants as it relates to our audit. And there were no other significant findings or issues that we deemed relevant to you in your oversight responsibilities. There were no modifications to the auditor's report. As indicated, it was an unmodified, clean opinion. Okay, the significant accounting policies are detailed in the combining financial statements of the plan. The accounting policies appear appropriate and applied consistently. We noted no transactions that were entered into that were significant or unusual, or any transactions for which there was a lack of authoritative guidance or consensus. The required disclosure of estimation uncertainty is included in the financial statements in the notes. Significant estimates include the fair value of investments and the net pension liability. The combining financial statement disclosures appear clear and complete in all material respects. Okay, this slide just provides our responsibility as it relates to internal control matters. We're responsible for obtaining reasonable assurance about whether the combining financial statements are free of material misstatement. Our audit included considerations of internal control over financial reporting as a basis for developing our audit procedures, but not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on the combining financial statements as it relates to the effectiveness of the system's internal controls. As such, we do not express an opinion on the effectiveness of the internal controls. Control deficiencies that were of a lesser magnitude than a significant deficiency were communicated to management. And I do want to point out there were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses identified. Recommendations were provided as well. And then this slide just basically goes through the definitions of the different control matters. And then this slide is our commitment to promote ethical and professional excellence. Okay, that concludes my presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely, thank you. So we'll drop off, my team and I just want to wish everyone a happy and healthy holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So with that presented, so let me go back to the beginning of the public session. Page 1, to accept the minutes of the previous meeting, Monday, November 9th, 2020, and to confirm the next meeting date, Wednesday, January 13th, 2021. Article 2, pages 2 through 6.
2 through 6, Joe, nothing of a controversial nature. Will so move.
So moved. Thank you, Kenny. Pages 7 through 9, a request for reexamination on the safeguards provision of the administrative code for retired police officer Edward Romero.
All right, so we'll move that discussion into the executive session.
Okay, move to executive. And finally, page 10, resolution regarding the interest rate for corrective payments.
So I had a conversation with the actuary's office after the last board meeting, and we, and we added, you can't see the resolution, I don't know why this is. I'm trying to display the resolution and it's not popping up. 1 second. I added the last line in the resolution. I'm just trying to figure out how I can show it. I'm sorry. Oh, here we go. So I added that last sentence at the request of the actuary's office. Other than that, the resolution remains the same. So this states that where we're not using 13,265 to correct the error, which would be when we're reaching out to the actuary's office to amortize the payment as a reduction in the pension. Where we're using that method, the actuarial assumption rate of 7% would be used. So this resolution would apply to the overpayment or underpayment of such errors where we're not using that section.
So I just have a couple of questions for the actuary's office. We had spent some time looking at the interest rate, what would be the appropriate interest rate for this correction plan. It was determined to be the Treasury, I think it was the 10-year rate that was agreed upon. And this sort of came over last night. And I just wanted to get a better understanding of why the actuary's office felt this change was necessary. And sort of what are the, practically speaking, what are the class of repayments that it's intended to cover? Anyone?
So Keith is actually on and he can't speak. He's having issues with his mic, but he said his chat's enabled, but I can start, and if Keith has anything, he can chime in. So this was, I guess, with consultation with Nicole, this part of the administrative code, per my understanding, does prescribe that an actual reduction should be used to calculate the corrective payments. And this resolution just made clear that the 10-year treasury rate is for instances outside of where this administrative code section would apply.
Okay, so, I mean, the administrative code section seems to cover, I mean, it seems to be pretty broad, right? I mean, it's any error that results in an over or an underpayment.
I'm gonna bring it up.
I mean, I have it, but if anyone else wants to see it, sure.
So if your question is when would it not apply, that specific section not apply,
Yeah,
is that your question?
If there are different categories of repayments that we're going to see, which categories are going to be covered by the 7% and which will be covered by the bond rate?
So I think Nicole, briefly touched upon that in terms of if it's going to be amortized, where, if it's multiple years of underpayment or overpayment in the past, and, a lump sum is going to be paid to correct the payments, then there's no actual, reduction. It's just going to be paid at one time. Whereas if, the payment might be too large for a member to pay back or the pension fund to pay back to the retiree, then an amortization might come about where, a lump sum can't be paid at one time, but will be stretched out over multiple years. And that's when an actual reduction could occur.
Okay, so it would not apply. I mean, is there a third scenario where the member agrees to pay back a certain amount over a period of time? Not necessarily actuarially determined that the bond rate would apply rather than the 7%? In other words, if the member chose to pay back a fixed amount, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I think that might be, in consultation with the attorneys to see how that could be handled. I don't think my office is necessarily the one that says, the member has to pay it back, an X amount or in a lump sum.
Okay, and is the actuary's office position that the 7% rate is required by the statute?
If this section of the code is applicable to the situation and an actual equivalence is supposed to be calculated, then it would be using the 7%, yes.
Okay, and it's not tier specific, right? So we're always using the 7% regardless of tier?
The attorneys might want to chime in, but my understanding is that it's not tier specific.
That is correct. So that was passed by resolution by the board in 2012, and that applies to the whole fund. So that's tier 1, 2, and 3.
Okay. Final question. I think you said that this would apply in the event of amortization of under or overpayments. What would be the situation where, say, the member is underpaid and then the fund is repaying the member through some form of some repayment that required a change to the, I guess what I'm saying is, what would be the circumstances that would require the 7% rate to an underpayment to a member?
Sorry, your question is when would an underpayment be necessary? Is that what you're saying?
No, if a member was underpaid, let's say, I think it's pretty clear that in certain circumstances where this resolution passed, and if the member's benefit were modified going forward to reduce the benefit, there would be a 7% rate applied. But are there any circumstances where the member is underpaid and the fund is paying the member back where the 7% rate would apply?
So Dave, I think the only time that it would work out that a member would be underpaid would be if we made a calculation error and there was an error of the fund where someone typed in a number into the computer system wrong, or for some reason the computer system malfunctioned and calculated the benefit incorrectly.
Right.
And in that instance, I believe we would make a lump sum payment. And if we were making the lump sum payment, we would be applying the 10-year treasury rate. If for some reason that the fund couldn't afford to or was incapable of making the lump sum payment, then maybe we would work with the actuary to increase the benefit over their life expectancy. But I can't foresee any reason why we would do that. And I'm also struggling to conceptualize an area where we would, because it just hasn't happened yet.
Right. Okay. So it sounds like there's probably not going to be a circumstance of an underpayment where the member is going to get the benefit of the 7%.
I would think not. And in fact, I feel like where we will use this resolution the most is in the case of death overpayments. Right now, when we're not notified of a death and we overpay and the family is collecting the money, there's no benefit to recoup that against. So we can't use the 7%. And right now, there's nothing allowing us to collect interest on that overpayment. So the collection firms are not collecting interest. Whereas with this resolution, we can ask for the interest on top of the death overpayment where we're not notified.
Okay. I want to make clear a point that that you might have hinted at, which is there are past payments and then there are future payments. So my understanding is we're talking about the past payments that we need to correct, meaning that if an error is discovered, the payments from here on out are going to be adjusted accordingly. So these are all just the past accumulative payments.
Okay, understood.
And I don't know if you can give me share screen access.
I can.
Okay, there's an example, a very quick example that I can show the members here, where what is the difference between a 10-year treasury rate versus a actual discount rate.
Okay, Sherry, I've passed it to you. You're going to get a pop-up.
Okay. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so now do you see a spreadsheet?
Yes.
Okay. So, this is just obviously an example that I had made up, assuming that, $1,000 was either underpaid or overpaid. So you see that here, and then it can accumulate at the 10-year treasury rate, which currently is a little bit less than 1%, but I just use 1%, or the actual discount rate at 7%. So what this is saying is for 10 years, 10 fiscal years, if these payments were paid, supposed to be paid during the middle of the fiscal year, this is how it's going to accumulate. And so say that these are underpayments. If these are underpayments, then at the end of the day, these total amounts would be what PPF would owe the retiree. So in a case that $1,000 was underpaid to them, PPF under the 1% scenario or the 10-year treasury rate would owe the member approximately $10,500. Under the 7% scenario, if we were to credit them 7% instead of 1%, then they would be owed, almost $15,000. If these amounts were overpayments instead, meaning PPF paid too much to the retiree, then these would represent these total amounts right here would represent the amount that the member or the retiree now owes back to PPF. So in that instance, under the 10-year treasury rate, they would only, air quotes, pay back about $10,500. But under the 7% scenario, they would actually pay back more, approximately $15,000. So it does depend just, the order of which direction, would be an actual gain or loss, and would the member be paying out more or less does depend on whether it's an overpayment or underpayment.
Okay, and is it presumed that the member is going to have the option of how he chooses to repay in the event of an overpayment?
I would assume yes. I mean, like I said, we've never encountered this,
right.
Knock on wood, and I hope to never. But I imagine it's in our best interest to get the money quicker.
Right.
And if they're going to write a lump sum check, I can't imagine us saying, no, we'd rather amortize it over your life expectancy.
Okay. Does the actuary's office have a position on that, and as to whether that's an amortization is required?
I mean, I think that's more of an administrative issue of how the payments are recouped. If it was turned to my office to determine the actuarial amount, then we could calculate that. But I don't think my office is in the position to really tell PPF, or the member retiree to, pay it back in whatever amount of time. I think, the actuary's office and my role is to make sure that the fund is made whole, so that, if we're supposed to be recouping 15,000 and we're only recouping 10,000, for example, then that difference needs to be made up over time, which would roll into the employer contributions that the city would have to make up.
So Dave, are you
again,
sorry, Sherry, are you asking about flexibility? That,
Yeah, just as to, if there's going to be a difference in the amount that the member is ultimately going to owe back. Say using that example, is he going to have the option of making either a lump sum payment or
yeah, we're always flexible. Okay. I think it would be in the member's best interest to pay it right then and there. Right. However, some people can't, and so again, we're always flexible.
I think it's also in the fund's best interest too, because if he's willing to write a check that day, we get the money immediately. If he dies while he's in a payment agreement, then we have to worry about attaching the estate. And I feel like anywhere we can get the money quicker is in everyone's best interest.
Well, the payment agreement is sort of the third option, right? I mean, you have the lump sum, the amortization.
Yeah, so we do enter into payment agreements with people, but the payment agreements we've entered into with people are in the cases of death overpayments. So the law department has provided me with a sample contractual agreement and what's called the confession of judgment, where when someone has taken responsibility for taking the money that they weren't entitled to, we enter into like a $500 a month payment plan where they pay us back all the money that they took from, their deceased parent or grandparent that they weren't entitled to. And they also sign a confession of judgment. This way, if they default on the agreement, we just enter the confession of judgment right into the court, and then we can, attach, and we get the 10% interest on the judgment under the statute.
Okay.
But the issue is we only get that interest if they default, right? Because then it's an actual judgment. We're not piling interest into these payment agreements that we're coming up with because we have no mechanism to collect the interest. So as of right now, the only payment agreements we've entered into as a fund have been in the case of death overpayments. Where once this resolution is passed, we would be adding on the treasury interest into those future payment agreements, not payment agreements that already exist.
And these are probably not your members.
Right.
They're not. There
might be a case where there is, but I don't ever recall that happening.
I don't think we've been collecting against a member who was also a beneficiary.
And we don't have a lot of cases you're saying where, other than the beneficiary circumstances, where there have been overpayments?
We have about a dozen that we're collecting on right now. For the most part, they're with a collection firm. The law department every couple of years puts out an RFP for a new collections firm. We have a few where we've entered into payment agreements because for whatever reason they don't want to go to collections and they've said, hey, yes, we owe you the money, and they'll sign this agreement. We're collecting on three of those right now.
Okay. That's all I have for today.
Okay, so in the meantime, we would like to just table it for review for 1 month, since the language was added in yesterday, even though we've gotten some answers. We'd like to review those answers. So I'd like to table that for 1 month. And that being the case, then that ends the public calendar, and I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session for purposes of discussing disability cases.
Second, John Dawson.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to close this webinar, and if you can all go into your email and follow the link to the executive that John Flynn sent on Monday. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.